Great. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone then to this event on how to support women-owned businesses through the COVID-19 response and recovery. My name is Stephanie Foster with UN Women, and I'm going to be your kind of pacer here, and not really your moderator, but I'm going to make sure everyone who's on the panel gets to speak. So I am going to start this discussion today. We have opening remarks for a few minutes, and I will turn it over first to Hilda Hardiman, who is head of the European Commission's Service for Foreign Policy Instruments and a great supporter of all the work that gets done. Thank you so much, Hilda.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Good afternoon to everybody. Good morning, depending where you are. Our great thanks to UN Women for organizing this very timely session in the context of the UN General Assembly as part of the virtual Business Live Global Impact Forum. And of course, very special thanks to the women entrepreneurs who will share with us today their achievements and their perspectives. This pandemic that affects us all wherever we are affects some more deeply than others. The way to recovery is hard, with many hurdles, and let's face it, especially for women. Just one example. Independent observers point out that because of structural barriers in many countries, women and minority small business owners will find it difficult to have access to state-supported coronavirus loans. We need to do whatever we can to fight discrimination and empower women to build back better for themselves, for their communities, for their societies, for sustainable development, for a better world. The European Union tries to walk the talk. The 750 billion euro recovery plan Next Generation EU, which the European Union has just adopted, puts a particular focus on fair and inclusive recovery for all. Measures of particular pertinence to women, such as fair binding minimum wages, are key. The challenge is global, and so must be our response. The virus that knows no borders makes a strong and urgent case for strengthened multilateralism and for the international rules-based order, for giving all of mankind, not just half of it, true opportunities. Clearly, we are stronger together, and that is why the EU and its member states partner with countries across the world to fight the pandemic and to build back better. We focus on people most at risk, including women. The private sector, small and medium-sized enterprises are key. We draw on our long-term cooperation with UN Women and with the ILO to boost the economic empowerment of women around the globe. We need the private sector fully on board. At the heart of our work are the 7 women empowerment principles that guide business on how to promote gender equality and women's empowerment in the workplace, marketplace, and community. To help put these principles into practice, we offer tools and expertise for gender-sensitive business responses. One such tool are the networks of women entrepreneurs, which we have launched in different countries together with UN Women and with the ILO. They offer female entrepreneurs a platform to share experiences, to learn, to support and inspire each other. We all know empowered women work wonders. The We Empower UN SDG Challenge gives women the opportunity to showcase their work and inspire others. Congratulations to the winners and to all participants. Your actions really speak louder than words. They can change the world. We are proud of you, and we are very proud to be your partner. And we count on you. You can count on us. Thank you so much.
Hi, and thank you so much, Hilda. Now I'm pleased to introduce Iona Bauer, the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, for some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and apologies, I was a few minutes late. You know how the Zoom life is. You're sometimes in the wrong meeting, which happened to me. So my apologies, but great to be with all of you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let me, on behalf of UN Women First, just say that I'm really, really pleased to be in this discussion, which I think is a terribly important one, given everything that is happening around us. I would really like to thank you, Hilde, for your partnership and support for the We Empower G7 program. This is something that we at UN Women really, really appreciate. And we'd also like to thank the sponsors of the event. I see my good friend Amanda Ellis there, and Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory is also a very key partner for us. I see my good friend Karen Yatman there, and we are very appreciative of the support, Karen, that we get from CEDAR. So really wonderful to see all of you, as well as to be able to interact with the audience that we have, including the folks from the We Empower UN SDG Challenge, another key partner for us. I think all of us are aware of the impact that COVID-19 is having on women. So I don't want to dwell too much on exactly what those impacts have been, but focus more in a forward-looking way on what can we do about it. Let me just say, though, that I think it's important to remind ourselves that the impact had an impact on women in 3 areas that are interrelated: income, health, and security. And actually the impact on female income is not surprising, because so many of the sectors that were affected through the lockdown and by the lockdown are sectors that are heavily feminized. Tourism, retail, domestic work, the garment industry, hospitality, all of these have a very high proportion of female labor force participation. So it's not surprising that women's income actually collapsed, because they are overrepresented on these. But when you add to the fact that there is a high degree of informality in many countries that we work in, and that informal sector has just become much bigger, this is actually added to the pain, because in the informal sector, women do not have health insurance, unemployment insurance, sick leave, or family leave. And across the board, part-time and temporary workers, which is a contractual arrangement that's very common among women, were the first to be laid off. So it's really important to keep in mind what is the context when we talk about women's entrepreneurship and what kinds of entrepreneurs we're really talking about. Then the other issue that I do want to underscore is that at the same time that paid work was vanishing, unpaid work was actually ballooning, because women remained the primary caregivers of homebound children, the elderly, and the deceased. So to make matters worse, we know could not borrow their way through this crisis, because they typically lack assets to pledge as collateral. So it's really important to understand these very intersecting ways that the pandemic has had an impact on women, because policy solutions that address these issues have to understand the nature of the problem properly before you can actually design interventions. And I do want to say a word about health, because while the effect on women's income may be temporary and can be resolved through fiscal stimulus packages and through directing of interventions, the effects on women's health will actually be permanent. So the lack of access to reproductive services, you may think has no place in a discussion of women's entrepreneurship. Well, let me tell you, those impacts will be lifelong impacts. So because of that, we actually have to worry about that as well in terms of women's entrepreneurship. And then finally, of course, we know that the rise in violence against women has been a key factor holding women back, because you cannot be productive if you are being subjected to violence. So there is a link between violence and productivity as well that we have to put on the table. So if losing your income and compromising your health were not bad enough, we know that COVID-19 was actually bringing about a fundamental shift in women's role as economic actors. And that's what we have to recognize. The Gates Foundation came out with its Goalkeepers report last week, and what they say is really disturbing. We have lost 25 years of progress in 25 weeks. So let's not kid ourselves about the size of the problem that we are facing, and then let's have real ambition about the size of the solution that we need to address this problem. So I'm very happy because the women's, the WE Empower G7 program has taken some very specific steps, including publishing the advocacy tool for women entrepreneurs, which has a lens on response and recovery. But I think we actually have to go beyond this. And the going beyond this is putting at the heart of the discussions with policymakers and private sector the size of the problem. So we at UN Women have begun a series of discussions. And Karen, this is pretty new, so I don't think we've had a chance to even discuss yet with CEDA, but we have been thinking about how do we bring a gender lens to the fiscal stimulus packages. And this is something, Hilde, you will be also very interested in, because we are trying to make sure that policymakers, as they think about the stimulus packages, are doing so with a gender lens. And this is why we have begun a deep process of engagement with partners like yourselves, but also with the international financial institutions and the development banks, so that in their lending, they are bringing a lens of gender to the stimulus packages and designing interventions that go to the heart of the issue. So that, in a nutshell, is how we are looking at the world today, and really appreciating the need to bring this focus on entrepreneurship, but link it to the other issues, so that the entrepreneurship interventions and the empowerment interventions are based in a deep understanding of the real issues. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to turn it to Karin Jantine from the Swedish International Development and Cooperation Agency.
Thank you very much. And what is there to be said after Anita's fantastic speech, underlining that all of the inequalities that were there before the pandemic are still there, and many of them are strengthened by the pandemic. So the need for all of us to work together to get a greater possibility for women to participate in economic life, political life, in the life that they choose for themselves. The need for us all to work together is even stronger than before the pandemic. First, after this, I would like to start off by congratulating you and women on your 10th anniversary. We have been a partner from the start. We have been working together in all parts of the UN Women mandate since the start. And we recognize many of your endeavors and many of your accomplishments over the years. But most of all, your rights-based approach and the normative work that you have been doing in all instances and in so many places. You've been taking on a normative approach to the UN reform, but also now, in this instance, when it comes to COVID-19 response and recovery, and having a rights-based and normative approach means putting the ones really needing it at the center of all of the efforts and all of the plans. So thank you all for that. As I said in the beginning, the pandemic has increased and underlined all of the existing inequalities. When it comes to the rights of women to take part in the economic life, we have to find new ways, and we have to work even stronger together. At CEDA, we work together with the private sector concretely at country level, but also normatively at global level when it comes to something called the Swedish Leadership for Sustainable Development and Swedish Investors for Sustainable Development. Both these groups have really put the right of women at the center of their work, really recognizing that equal companies having an equal amount of women on the board are making higher profits. So for different reasons, also companies are putting a strength on this. Just two final words. I'm a bit unsure of the sound. Is it fine? I'm looking at Stephanie. Yeah, good. The Swedish government supports generation equality, and we are Sweden is co-lead to the Global Action Coalition for Economic Justice, working for social and economic reform, legislation, decent work and trade that empowers women. What we are trying to do is, of course, to make the link that Anita underlined. Economic empowerment has to be, preceded with sexual and reproductive health and rights, the right for young girls to go to school, and the rights for young girls to live a secure life. If a girl, for one reason or other, is forced to have a child at 14 years of age, she will not have a very good start in life when it comes to the economic life. She will be forced to have other priorities in her life. Therefore, the links between our strong focuses on rights, on sexual and reproductive health and rights, and economic empowerment of women is evident. Last but not least, it's the decade of action. It's the decade of action. We have to work together. We have to work together to support women, but also to fund the underfunded Goal 5. We have to fund the underfunded Goal 5 to reach all of the other goals. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this panel, and I'm very much looking forward to learning and discussing with all of you over this time. Thank you.
Great, and thank you. And our final opening speaker, Amanda Ellis, who is the Director of Global Partnerships at the Arizona State University Wrigley Global Futures Lab.
Thank you, and aloha, and a very good morning, everybody from Hawaii. I am honored to be a member of the US G7 Advisory Group and wanted to congratulate UN Women on this 10th anniversary. I was lead specialist for gender at the World Bank at that time and was so excited to help launch the Women Empowerment Principles. 10 years on, I'm just thrilled to see that there are 3,700 signatories now. And this is just a part of the work that the program does. I've been so impressed to be part of the policy dialogues that have really helped ensure that agenda response to COVID is really at the forefront for policymakers. McKinsey recently published research that showed that some $13 trillion could be added to the global economy and of benefit to everyone with that gender-informed response. So this year, it was wonderful to see the high-level roundtable and the call to action to G7 governments. Now, with regards to the We Empower Entrepreneurs, who you will hear from later, moderated by my fellow advisory board member, Professor Patty Greene, in the application form they fill out, they learn about the Women Empowerment Principles, and they are signatories. So you will see in the WEPS bulletin this month, our awardee for Europe and North America actually featured. The other thing that I think is just wonderful is the amount of knowledge products that UN Women is able to generate that really help all of us who are wanting this information to know exactly what we should be doing. And the advocacy toolkit that Anita mentioned, as well as the tools that are provided for individual women to do as Hilda said, and really make a positive difference. And Melinda Gates wrote a very interesting article recently, which referred to women being not only victims of a broken world system, but able to be the architects of a new one. And I feel so encouraged when I hear Karen and Hilda with the very, very impressive response from the EU, which is green and gender inclusive. And when I look at women entrepreneurs and see the incredible work that they are doing to really, as Kristalina Georgieva says, actually build forward better. So I'm so looking forward to the dialogue today. Thank you all so much. And I'm going to steal your ending, Hilda, and say that empowered women can work wonders. Thank you all.
Well, thank you to all of our opening speakers. We're going to move next to our panel, our first panel discussion, which is about the critical role of women-owned businesses at the center of COVID response and recovery. I will briefly introduce the moderator and panelists, and then they will dive right in. Our panel is being moderated today by Anna Falth, who is the Senior Policy Advisor for the We Empower G7 program and the head of the WEP Secretariat at UN Women. Our three amazing panelists are Amy Neal, Senior Vice President, StartPath and FinTech MasterCard, Julia Simon, the Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary at Mary Kay, and Joram Schraven, the Director of Impact and ESG at the Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank. The floor is yours. And we have about a half an hour for this discussion, so I will be keeping time.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I think that we're a little bit over time, so let's just start with the discussion. We have three amazing organizations with us today, and they all come to the women entrepreneurship from different angles. I'd like to start with asking a question to Mary Kay and to Julia Simon, who is the Chief Legal Officer at Mary Kay, to talk a little bit to us about Mary Kay's commitment to women entrepreneurship, but also a little bit about this initiative that we launched about a year ago, Women Entrepreneurship Accelerator, and how you're leading this work together with the UN and the different agencies that are involved, and a little bit about the mission and what this accelerator is set out to accomplish over the next few years. So Amy, do you want to get, Julia, do you want to get started?
Certainly. Thanks so much, Anna. If you have not heard the story about Mary Kay, let me take you back to 1963 when the company was founded. And our founder, Mary Kay Ash, in her mid-40s and with three grown children who she raised while she had a 25-year career in corporate America, remember it's 1963, she decides that after retiring from corporate America, she was going to start a company whose mission was to enrich women's lives through entrepreneurship, and that's how she was going to empower women. And 57 years later, we are still here, spreading women's entrepreneurship to women around the world. Mary Kay Ash understood that principle, again, back in 1963, and this company has been carrying out that mission for the last 57 years, and we're in 40 markets around the world. So we know a little bit about giving women the power to create and enrich their communities through entrepreneurship. So we were super excited when the concept of the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator came to life, because that allows us through our corporate stewardship to continue to spread women's entrepreneurship around the world. And we're doing that with the partnership with 6 UN agencies. And because I get so excited, I don't want to miss anyone, so I wrote it down so I can make sure I cover all 6 of them. It is UN Women, of course, the United Nations Office for Partnerships, the International Labor Organization, International Trade Center, the UN Global Compact, and the United Nations Development Program. So we're partnering with these agencies to bring about women's entrepreneurship around the world in these 4 ways. Education, because we know that women equipped with knowledge and information can do great things. Funding, we want to make sure that women have access to resources and funding so that they can move forward with their businesses. Advocacy, because believe it or not, there are still laws around the world that are impediments to women becoming entrepreneurs and excelling in entrepreneurship around the world. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing raises all of those issues that you just think about how recent it was that women, even in the United States, could get access to credit, could sign a lease on their own, could get funding on their own. And so that work still needs to be done around the world, and the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator will help with that. And then finally, we've got to have businesses and systems with an open mind to consider women through supply chain and through procurement. And so those are the ways we're planning through the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator to bring about this goal. We're going to educate, empower, and unleash 10 million women entrepreneurs around the world. And so that's what the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator is all about. Anna, I'm not sure if I missed any of your questions. I'm sure I did. I talk fast and apologize to everyone on the call for that. But if I missed anything, let me know.
No, thank you so much. So I'd really like to pick up on those different elements. And as the UN, we are coming in and contributing to this accelerator in different ways. But one key way that we know and we hear about over and over is the financing. So we have two institutions here that work systematically on that. We have MasterCard that works directly with women, and we also have FMO, the Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank, that works indirectly. So maybe we can start a little bit, Amy, to talk a little bit the direct work, the MasterCard's commitment to women, supporting women entrepreneurs, but also how you're working with the spectrum of different women, from startups to micro entrepreneurs to women in more kind of higher end sectors. And then we'll go into afterwards to hear from FMO and Corinne about the indirect work. But I think this is a really important work on financing women entrepreneurs. So over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about MasterCard's work and support for women entrepreneurs across the globe. Just to start, I will also give a little bit of context, a little bit of background to the way that MasterCard has arrived at some of the initiatives that we're focused on today. So the backdrop here is that MasterCard has a 10-year background of a commitment to inclusive growth generally, to help build a more connected world where everyone has equal access. And about 5 years ago, we made a commitment to bring 500 million financially excluded people into the digital economy. In the middle of the pandemic, we doubled down on that. We achieved that initial target. So we doubled down on that with a commitment to another 500 million included into the digital economy by 2025. And in conjunction with that commitment, we specifically focused on our support for small businesses. So we have a target to support 50 million small businesses across the world. I was particularly taken by the point that Hilda Hardeman made in her opening remarks around how we shouldn't just focus on 50% of what exists in terms of small and medium-sized businesses. So at MasterCard, we've made a commitment that 25 million of those 50 million small and medium-sized businesses that we will support will be led by female entrepreneurs. So that's the backdrop to our commitment. It's a deep commitment right across the business, with all business units participating. It meets MasterCard's mantra of doing well by doing good. So all of our initiatives that are designed to meet the needs of those 25 million entrepreneurs are also set in the backdrop of how we run our business and what makes our business successful. So to your question, Anna, about the spectrum. So we talk about female entrepreneurship. It's an incredibly broad topic. And from MasterCard's point of view, we've tried to be thoughtful about the different interventions for the different segments that exist within women entrepreneurship. My day-to-day responsibility at MasterCard is a program that we call Start Path. It's a program that we've been running for 6 years, and it's specifically focused on identifying high potential startup companies from right across the globe that are innovating in financial services, commerce, and fintech. And we bring those companies through a 6-month program where we provide them with operational supports, we provide them with technology assets, and we provide them with a vast global network. Now, we've been running that program for 6 years, and we've been incredibly conscious of the fact that going out generally to look for high potential startup companies means that you attract an awful lot of male-only run companies. So for the last 18 months, we've taken a specific action ourselves to make sure that we're targeting female-led companies in the spaces that are important to us. That's meant that we've had to look in different places. We've built relationships with venture capital funds that are targeting their money at female-led businesses. We've taken a look at our own processes to make sure that we acknowledge bias in all of the ways that it materializes when we're thinking about selecting those companies. And that's led us to, in the last 18 months, having about 30% of our cohort being women-led businesses, women entrepreneurs. On the back of that work, we've been really excited to announce just last month that we're now going to take some of those learnings and run a specific program for women entrepreneurs, for women fintech in Colombia. And we're doing that in partnership with USAID. One of the things that we recognize is that for female high potential companies, they are less likely to attract the venture capital dollars that male only companies attract. And therefore, we're taking a specific focus to make sure that for that program, we dedicate ourselves to very early stage companies who see that their path to growth will be through venture capital, but are not quite there yet. So that's the sort of the one end of the spectrum of female entrepreneurship that we're focused on at MasterCard. Another part of that spectrum for us is actually a very different type of woman entrepreneur. Micro entrepreneurs building local businesses relevant to their communities in many different parts of the world. So at MasterCard, we deployed a program in Africa for small businesses, which was very much focused on supporting those companies to attract capital by providing them with the ability to demonstrate their creditworthiness in alternative ways. So typically, creditworthiness will be demonstrated through your track record of repayments. But in the case of small businesses, that's often challenging to identify. So we've created a new way through our program Jazaduka in Africa of looking at previous spend, using previous spend as one of the metrics to understand creditworthiness. And that program has been incredibly successful in supporting small and medium-sized businesses in Africa. What we're now doing, again, an announcement that we made in the heart of the pandemic, is we're taking that program to India, where we recognize that about 90% of the Kirana stores in India are led by men. So the program that we're standing up in India will be specifically focused at providing access to credit via novel approaches to creditworthiness for women-led businesses.
Great.
I'm also conscious that I'm talking very fast and a lot. So I'll pause.
No, thank you so much, Amy. I think this is a very, very good segue into Jorim's discussion on some of the work that they are doing in financing women entrepreneurs, but indirectly. And what I've heard from your team, Forum, is that you are helping to de-risk investment in women entrepreneurs. So we're very eager to hear about that. And I think that is a good segue from what Amy just talked about. So over to you, Forum.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Anna. So yes, of course, we also work occasionally directly with some of our female-owned enterprises, but by far the most of the work that we do at FMO is indeed indirectly through particularly financial intermediaries, where we see great potential to reach many female entrepreneurs in the emerging markets where we operate. I think the reason that we see that potential is also related to our goal to reduce inequality, and partially because of the structure of the emerging markets where we operate. So you see that about 22-23% of women in Africa are in fact entrepreneurs. That's a lot of women to reach. So you better leverage off the local structures to achieve that. The other reason is that essentially you'll see that most of those women are actually relatively small enterprises. So what you won't be finding that often to talk about the VC that Amy referred to is the classic unicorns that we're chasing in the Western markets. Rather in Africa, we like to talk about the zebras. So that's many smaller businesses, which are actually very financeable. So I was really happy to hear about that project that is looking to close some of the data gaps that we see about female entrepreneurs. I think data gaps in general for gender are a real issue, but also in finance, it's absolutely important to close these kind of data gaps to make the businesses more financeable. So I was very happy to hear that that Amy is financing projects like that in Africa. So we certainly need that. So to move into indirect investments, I think banks are a particularly promising venue to actually reach a lot of female entrepreneurs on the African continent, as well as in our other markets, and that's a prime venue that we use at FMO. And I think we've been educating the banking clients of FMO that indeed women entrepreneurs are very financeable and good credit risks. We know that they're typically about 50% more likely to actually repay their loans. But certainly my male counterparts are not always aware of these fantastic statistics. So that's part of what we do. We help close the data gap and show the business case. I think that's an important element. But then we also de-risk, as you mentioned. So there's a very interesting program that was financed by the European Commission as well as the Dutch government, which we call the Zero program. And that actually seeks to de-risk the banks that we finance when they finance female entrepreneurs. It's quite an exciting program, and particularly in the context of COVID, they kindly allowed an expansion of the mandate of that program to finance particularly COVID-stressed SMEs and also women-owned SMEs in that context, which I think is crucial to ensure that we help women entrepreneurs through the COVID pandemic.
Thanks, Julia. We are moving fast to our end time, but I'd like to touch a little bit about the COVID. So thanks, everyone has touched upon it a little bit. But if I can go back to Julia, Amy, and then Corinne to talk a little bit about the impact on women entrepreneurs. What have been your observations in terms of women entrepreneurship over this past 6 months? But also any particular tactics that you have used to support women. How have you shifted your programs to support women? So, Julia, over back to you.
Sure. You know, it's always the case when there is a crisis. It impacts those most vulnerable the most and the first. And so that's obviously been what we've been talking about here with all of the speakers with regard to women and COVID. In terms of what we can see from a success perspective, you know, I look at our businesses themselves, and what we found is women who have access, like we say, to technology, women who have access to be able to pivot quickly, to have access to resources, to have access to information, do better. What's interesting about this whole shut-in where no one can touch each other and come close to each other is it actually requires those close personal relationships to be even stronger before COVID. And so that's a place where women can win. So COVID has all of these crises, but it also shows the resilience of women who make sure things happen because they have to. They have to do it. And when they have access to resources to do those things, they always come out better. So I'm excited to see what happens with things like the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator, even after COVID, because I think it is a good test for what we need to equip women with to be successful no matter what the circumstance.
Thank you very much. Amy?
Yeah, so the impact of COVID on women entrepreneurs has been undeniable, and we heard that in the opening remarks, just some of the ways that has manifested itself. What I'd like to focus on a little bit is actually some of the strengths that we've witnessed that women entrepreneurs have. While there are huge amounts of work that are needed to be done to support them to overcome their challenges, there are particular strengths that we have seen shining through with the women entrepreneurs that we've worked with. And for me, the first of those is purposeful leadership. Purposeful leadership has been the order of the day over the past 6 months. And the women entrepreneurs that we work with tend to build purposeful leadership into the very foundations of their businesses. They build those businesses within their communities. They build those businesses for broader stakeholders than just their customers. They build businesses around their employee base, the societies that they're embedding themselves in, the supply chains that they're part of. And that, I think, gives us great hope for women businesses in the recovery. I also think that women businesses tend to be very mission driven, and the women entrepreneurs that I've had the fortune to engage with over the past 6 months have been redoubling on the very reasons that they started those businesses in the first place. They came from places of challenge, places of need, places of issues that they'd faced themselves, which I think also gives us sort of great hope for the future. And then the final point as it relates to, the challenges of COVID. Rightly or wrongly, women, the research tells us that women build their businesses on less capital, typically 30% less capital. So if we can put the right interventions in place, the right support programs in place, such as those that we're hearing from Julia and Yoram as well, I think that it's important that we acknowledge both the tailwinds as well as the headwinds.
Great. Thank you so much. I like the idea that I heard from both of you of the solidarity among women and in the supply chain. Yoram, over to you.
Yes. So for sure, we do see also some problems. I think over 90% of female-led businesses have been reporting significant reductions in revenues. I think Anita mentioned that we've regressed maybe 25 years in our progress towards SDG 5. So I think there's a real problem to be solved. And there's a few things I think that can genuinely help to do so. So I mentioned actually de-risking the financiers of the female entrepreneurs during the crisis with, for example, guarantees. I also think it's important to actually keep the financiers themselves liquid. So we need to ensure that we are reliable financiers as development finance institutions and governments to those who are actually intermediating these female entrepreneurs. That's absolutely crucial as well. And then I think in normal times already, we find it's very important that you don't just send money. That gender finance and gender lens investing is not just a case of getting the money to the female entrepreneur, but that often to be truly successful, it does need to be complemented with essentially technical assistance programs that deal with education, with really tailoring the product to the specific needs. And we find that in COVID that is doubly relevant, in fact. So what we've done, for example, we've really set up a COVID rapid response program for technical assistance, where we're providing facilities, also facilities with a gender lens. One example is actually in Pakistan. The program is literally called "Don't Let COVID Put You Out of Business" from one of our clients. And they set up essentially a technical assistance program for their female entrepreneurs again, focusing on digital skills, for example. How do you move part of your business online? How do you work yourself through the crisis? I think these are also very important interventions where financiers can collaborate with governments to help the female entrepreneurs not to go out of business and actually get through the crisis.
I like that name. I think that should be the positive spirit of all our discussions going forward. And it's also bringing some points, I think, to the Women Entrepreneurship Accelerator, that it comes as a package. We can work on with different partners on different things, but we need to incorporate the education, the funding elements, the advocacy to make sure that there is support. And we heard earlier also about the advocacy tool that we published, I think, 2 weeks ago from UN Women for women entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs associations have a tool to really know what they can ask for. I would also like to thank both MasterCard and Mary Kay for being great signatories of the Women's Empowerment Principles. This is a way, and we heard that also from all of you, that we should support women entrepreneurs, but also make sure that we have gender equality at the forefront of this agenda, that we are incorporating gender perspectives into the supply chains and into all of this work. So, Jorim, this is also an invitation for you to join. We have FinDev Canada have already joined, and we're looking for inviting you as well to join the Women's Empowerment Principles. But our time is up, and I would like to thank everyone, Amy, Julia, and Jorim, for joining us today and for sharing your wonderful work that you're doing to support women entrepreneurs. So I'll hand it over to you, Stephanie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Julia, Amy, and Jorim for that amazing panel and really a great conversation. I am now going to turn the rest of the program over, I think, to Amanda Ellis, who is going to introduce to the group here the We Empower SDG Challenge, and then I believe she will turn it over to Patty Greene and her panelists. So over to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and all of you inspiring speakers. Just double checking that my video is turned back on. No, it's not.
The audio is on. The video is not.
And
Patty's video is on, so if you, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'll introduce Patty, even though my video won't work, and hopefully Chloe will come to the rescue with the tech. So thank you for very inspiring work at G7 and UN Women. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce the We Empower UN SDG Challenge, which was launched in 2018 by the Secretary General, the President of the World Bank, and the Council of Women World Leaders in the margins of the General Assembly. The aim of the program is to honor and invest in women entrepreneurs who are actually supporting the work of the Sustainable Development Goals through their business endeavors and to inspire others to follow their lead. So I'm delighted to introduce my fellow G7 We Empower Advisory Board member, Dr. Patty Greene, the 18th Director of the Women's Bureau of the U.S. Department of Labor, and now Professor Emeritus at Babson College. And Patty is a globally recognized expert in women's entrepreneurship, and she will be showcasing our wonderful awardee and finalists for the North American and European regions. Patty, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, and aloha to you in Hawaii. It has been an honor to be on the G7 Advisory Board, and I'm especially honored to be moderating this panel with women entrepreneurs this morning around our combined goals of women's entrepreneurship, empowerment through the SDG goals, and in the time of the COVID, and all of this focusing on your leadership to drive change. Now at Babson, we talk about being entrepreneurial through three main things. One is the ability to identify opportunities, organize resources for number two, and the third is providing that leadership to create something of value. And that's what we really want to hear from each of you today, talking about the ways in which you're doing that, creating the value in the world that you really want to see. We're going to start with Bessie Schwartz. Bessie Schwartz, congratulations on being our finalist for the We Empower SDG Challenge of 2020. Bessie is the co-founder and CEO and lead social scientist of Cloud to Street. She's also the senior strategic advisor to the Yale program on climate change communication, and she focuses on human-centered design for disaster response tools. Bessie, I love the way you describe yourself as a community organizer by training and by heart. So I'll turn it over to you. We're eager to learn from you.
Thank you so much, Patty. And it's such a pleasure to be here and a real privilege to be on this panel with some amazing other female entrepreneurs. At Cloud to Street, we are focused on a disaster adjacent to the current pandemic and really a compounding disaster and one that will grow over time, and that's climate change. But we know that there's a different way. At Cloud to Street, we harness AI, satellites, and crowdsourcing community intelligence on the ground in order to monitor and analyze disaster and changing risk around the world as it's unfolding. And this is designed to make sure that the world, all communities, can prepare and respond to these hazards. Climate change is here. That is no surprise, I think, to anyone who's paying attention. Wildfires are ravaging the American West, burning millions of acres, and floods just this week in Vietnam, Pakistan, Niger, in the American South are displacing hundreds of thousands of potentially millions of people from just those disasters. And famine driven by drought and then exacerbated by the current pandemic is going to leave probably an unprecedented number of people hungry. These shocks disproportionately affect those who are already under-resourced and vulnerable. Women are at the front lines of the impact and can be at the front lines of the solutions. So while Cloud to Street focuses on climate action, that SDG goal, adapting to an unstable climate undergirds all of the SDGs. And yet, as many of us know, today, most communities around the world do not have the information that they need to prepare and respond to disasters. And 70% of economic losses from natural hazards are uninsured. So the status quo of disaster information will not work, and we need to reinvent new ways of understanding them. I am here to say that that's possible. And over the past 5 years, Cloud to Street has enabled 20 countries working with governments and now insurers to leapfrog their information systems and enable them to prepare and respond specifically to flooding. We're starting with flooding because flooding affects more people and more assets than any other hazard every year. And because the old way of analyzing floods desperately needed to be reinvented. Traditional flood mapping requires a lot of field data on the ground and expensive models to be fully accurate. Think costly, slow, and going out of date quickly, especially if you don't have lots of field equipment, you can't afford to maintain that on the ground. So our technology does this completely differently. We automatically harness satellites that are circling the Earth every day, and we activate high-resolution satellites when needed. Our algorithms then analyze those millions of images of satellite imagery in order to find and pinpoint floods as they're happening, and then monitor them as they're going on in near real time. We can also then look back in time at observations at those pixels in order to understand the patterns of risk there and what likely risk is in the future. We then use our own crowdsourcing networks in order to verify that and co-produce all of the information with communities on the front lines. Our partners in government, humanitarian insurers are using this new scientific platform in order to create resilience in 3 ways. First, we make historical flood risk maps in order to plan for floods before they happen and reduce risk over the long term. Mapping floods and flood risk in near real time can alert government officials and others on the ground when an emergency is emerging and enable them to precisely do search and rescue and make that effective. And then third, this platform can enable insurers to release insurance payouts more rapidly and transparently and all remotely. So let me tell you really quickly what this looks like on the ground. Let me take you to the Congo. In 2017, a flood hit in the northern part of the Congo, in Mfondo. And it took the government 3 weeks to know that 5,000 people were in need of food relief. So they called us. And we reduced that time by scanning the country every day and seeing where floods were maybe happening. We reduced it from 3 weeks to 3 days, or really less. And this came in handy when in 2018, a year later, we got a desperate text from the UN saying 17,000 refugees had moved in to potentially at-risk areas, and they didn't know if they needed to be relocated. We rapidly analyzed those areas and say that 7,000 of the refugees were at high risk. The government used this information to relocate those refugees, and 9 months later, that camp was almost washed away in a major flood. We continue to work with the UN and the government to enable them to precisely do response and recovery to the places that have been affected during that flood. And now we're working with them in a new rainy season as we monitor as risk levels that are rising in that country. This is what every community needs to prepare and leapfrog their information systems. But let's be real, in order to do that preparation for governments, businesses, and communities, they need financing. We've seen this time and time again as ministers turn to us literally and say, with what money do you expect me to go rescue those people? And planners say, how are you going to finance that new protection? Or shopkeepers who've looked at me and said, how am I going to rebuild? So we're working with Willis Towers Watson and other insurers to expand disaster risk financing through new methods to all those who need it with parametric flood insurance. We've seen time and time again that these kinds of hazards affect those who are already vulnerable. And adapting to an unstable climate is required to hit really all of the SDGs. We're so excited to help meet these goals and rise to this challenge by inventing new ways of understanding and analyzing disaster risk. So thank you so much for having me. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Patty.
Well, actually, Bessie, I have a question for you too before we move on. You've worked, you said about across 20 countries, something like that? If
right.
You're looking at, driving policy change, what's one first tool that you might share, tool or approach that you might share with our audience today about how do you actually get policy changed?
And Stephanie, if you could just weigh in, I think, Amanda, your microphone is on and it's making it hard for some of the participants to hear. So if you could mute your microphone, that'd be great. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thanks for a wonderful question, Patty. The big thing I would say is prepare before the hazard. Most disaster financing across everything happens afterwards. It's about 3% is spent in prevention. And we are brought in, Cloud to Street, all the time once the disaster hits. Can you help us now that hundreds of thousands of people are being flooded? We do that, of course, but it's too late. If I had one thing, I would say develop a plan for both preparing ahead of time and what's going to happen when the disaster goes down. Obviously, that's information is required for that, but I think taking action months ahead of time, and in many cases, at least a year ahead of time in your country is the most important thing. And that does require policy and obviously financing incentives.
All of those things. Thanks, Bessie. I think that's a great answer. Let's move now to Caterina Paula Brunat of Göteborg, Spain. I also like your self-description of talking about yourself as a nudging expert. You're the founder and CEO of Nudge and works to advance sustainable business and sustainable lifetime. So we're looking forward to hearing from you as well, Caterina. Please go ahead.
Thanks so much. I'm actually from Sweden.
What did I say?
I thought you said Spain. That's what I heard. I would love to be from Spain, by the way, but I am born in Sweden.
Oh, no, I love Sweden. Please stay with Sweden. Go ahead.
So I'm going to just share my screen to share a few slides with you to give you some practical examples on what we do. So let's see if this works. Does this work? No, wait a sec. Here. And
there we go.
There we go. Great. So thank you so much for inviting me to this. So my passion is to make sustainable choices easy. And I'm the founder and CEO of Nudge, a Swedish startup within behavioral science. So we work with behavioral design and we are experts on a method called nudging. Our mission is to build the world's leading platform for hands-on solutions that makes sustainable choices easy and also create measurable impact in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we only take on assignments that are working within the SDGs and nothing else. And in all of these 17 SDGs, there are behavioral challenges, and that's what we're working with. So it all started with, I have a background within communications, and I worked a lot with giving presentations on how to get to action and how to create change within reducing climate change, for example.
Katarina, excuse me, before you go on, I see if you double click on the screen share, your slides should get larger. Right now we see them as very tiny.
Very tiny, that's not good. Let's see.
No. Try it once, and if not, then just keep going.
Okay, let's see if I can come back to their screen share. It says click twice to minimize. That's not good.
Actually, it says everyone needs to do it for themselves. So just keep going and we'll catch up as we can.
Maybe this one is better. Let's see if this works. Is this better? Does it share? Can you see my screen? And can you see a picture that says the problem?
Yes, and for everyone else, when I clicked on it, it got larger. So I think we're in good shape. And Katarina, the floor is yours.
Okay, then I'm going to continue. So what I realized a few years ago is that every time I ask people who wants change, who wants to see some change in the world, people raise their hand saying, yes, we want change, we want it now. And then when you dig a little deeper and you ask people who wants to change, not so many raise their hands anymore. And I see a lot of money spent on infrastructure, company policies, tech solutions, and everything with the aim to solve sustainability challenges. And this is all good. We all need this. But at the same time, very often the behavioral change is missing. So we don't quite get the effect that we could have if we also put some effort into behavioral change. So we work with a method called nudging. It's a method within behavioral psychology, and the father of this method is Professor Richard Thaler. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017. And if you're not familiar with what a nudge is, it is an indirect suggestion that aims to influence motives and decision-making without legislation, carrots, and sticks. And with that said, I would like you to see nudging as a tool in the toolbox, because we still need legislation, carrots, and sometimes, unfortunately, also sticks. But it's not always that they are working. So I wanted to give you an example of how I think we need a new narrative and how we can create action, a practical example of that. So one study we did in the city of Gothenburg is that they had a littering problem. And the problem was that people just put their cigarette butt everywhere. This is a very common problem everywhere in the world. A behavioral challenge for each city all over the world. And what we did is that we framed the message a bit differently. So instead of just saying, put your cigarette butt there, we said, please put it there over in the ashtray because the pigeons are trying to quit smoking. And then we put this little sign of the pigeon wearing this nicotine patch to make it a bit more humorous. And this is the new narrative that I think is also combined with what we're used to and what is the new type of framing in the future. Because if we can base it more on a tonality of feelings and humor instead of just punishment and hard instructions, I think we can get much better result. And littering is just one example, but it also compared to talking about female entrepreneurship, it's very much about instructions and not so much about getting into the feelings of it. So this new messaging actually gave 70% better results. So this is just one example. What I think we can learn from behavioral science is that our human brains needs a different way of thinking, because the historic way is very often the rational way. So everyone has two systems in our brains. And when we make our decisions, it's based on either system 1 or system 2. And system 1, it goes for intuition and instinct. So if you use system 1 in your decision making, maybe you go on autopilot. You make quite quick decisions and based on feelings and your instinct. And then we have system 2, that is more the rational thinking. And very often policies are made out of rational thinking, based out of this type of system, where we ask for numbers, we ask for facts, and we think that we take a little time to make the decision. But when you look into the research, actually 95% of all our decisions is based out of system 1, so where we go on autopilot. So therefore, we also need to base the solutions on a system 1 thinking. And this is also very, if you compare to what female entrepreneurs often do, I think we are unfortunately better on using system 1 than system 2. But the world we live in are based on a system 2 thinking. So I think we definitely need to change the whole perspective in this. And that is what we can learn from behavioral science. When it comes to COVID-19, I just want to touch just 1 minute about this, because early this summer, we got funding from the region Västra Götaland, the Gothenburg region in Sweden, to see if we can build a digital platform with best practice for a smart recovery based on behavioral psychology. And we call it Smart Habits. It's a combination of the world's largest database for hands-on solutions and also combined with a digital nudging coach. So with this platform, we can support organizations building the new normal for a smart recovery and create and sustain new habits based on the SDGs. So this is something we're building at the moment. And if you want to be a part of it or partner with us building this forward, please reach out and we'd be happy to talk with you about that. So I'm going to stop there and just say that my take is we need to make sustainable choices easy. That's the only way that we can create a new narrative and create a more sustainable future and also more equal future. Thank you so much.
So Katarina, you're being honored for here, with the group as an entrepreneurial leader. What's something you've done differently as an entrepreneurial leader in this time of COVID?
Differently. Well, we already worked remotely before, so now we've established that as a habit. What I've done differently is that I think I've even more been trusting my intuition and trusting the psychology behind our decision making, because very often when we come into crisis mode, we are not very rational beings, and just seeing that and being aware of that can help us make better choices also as entrepreneurs. So trusting my intuition has been the best way for me.
Well, it's nice when what you actually do works with the theory that you're building your company upon, doesn't it?
Well, try to live as you learn, right?
Good. Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Iona Bauer. Iona is the founder of eLiberare in Romania and fights against violence and human trafficking by addressing both root causes and building barriers between the traffickers and their potential victims. She's an Ashoka Fellow and she is driving systemic change. Iona.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Patty. My name is Iona Bauer, and I get the honor to lead eLiberare, a civil society organization working on preventing and combating human trafficking. We are based in Bucharest, Romania, and I cannot start my thank you possible, specifically UN Women and a happy anniversary. To UN Women, the European Union, ILO, the We Empower team, and of course, Arizona State University for taking a global lead on matters of sustainability and other crucial issues. As we live in challenging times, and the pandemic has disproportionately affected women and girls more, both numerically and in intensity. Also, we see that the vulnerable, be it because they do not have certain resources or because they come from certain geographic areas, are even more exposed to exploitative situations. We see a perfect storm, basically, in which desperate job seekers who are willing to take greater risks in order to make a living meet desperate business owners who are now more willing to ignore certain regulations and ethical standards of engagement in order to basically save their business. At eLiberare, we've seen funding from projects long-term development in order to cover emergency needs. And these will lead to even more crisis in the future. We've seen survivors of human trafficking who had found stability, but all this in entry-level jobs, fall back into uncertainty and facing triggers that remind them a lot of their exploitation. We saw it in isolation or being locked down, sometimes even with those who were responsible for their trafficking nightmare in the first place. We also saw clearly that adaptability and the flexibility of digitalization does not work well with charity jobs that are usually the ones accessible to those deprived of both soft and hard skills due to their challenging background. As we prepare for relaunching or bracing for another wave, I'm not sure yet, we see ourselves challenged not only to bounce back and to return to normal, but to rebuild smarter, more efficiently, and with a greater intent towards more inclusivity, looking not only at gender, but also at the stories that make someone uniquely themselves, including the trauma that sometimes is unspeakable and we see every day. The way that Liberare coped with the pandemic was by challenging ourselves to move even more towards human trafficking survivors, respectively, those who motivate our educational endeavors, through which we have reached over 150,000 students during the pandemic school year, and through which we address SDG 4, obviously, or our international consulting that is based on SDG 5 and SDG 8, and our capacity building activities that encompass all of the above mentioned SDGs. We obviously try to scale through policy, therefore our advocacy activities have also been reshaped during this time. We found a definition of resilience in the most unexpected place in our case, a shelter for those who fell victims to human traffickers. And we looked at them to show us how to recover from something unexpected, undeserved, and deeply challenging beyond one's expectations and understanding. That's how our latest resource and program was not only survivor-inspired, but it was survivor-led. We found our wings, because that's the name that our survivor partners chose for this project, and addressed the issue of resilience and how to include it in all of our activities by giving up our expert heads for a while and returning to the drawing board with correct priorities and the right team on board. Therefore, maybe one lesson that we can all take from this pandemic is that those who seem vulnerable at first are actually centrally valuable in how we create programs, do business, and go about our day-to-day from now on. Thank you.
You're on mute. Patty, you're on mute.
You know, sorry about that. I'd like to go back a minute to what you were saying about reshaping policy, that your efforts, you have to redo your efforts in a different way during COVID. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I think access to lawmakers is challenging, and depending in the region that we work, it might be even more so because of maybe just so right now, just trying to come up with very well documented briefs and clear action points that we can then send and do a lot of advertising and communicating around them, showing where we are and where we would get to if these come into place. Those have been key for us.
Great. So I think if you think back over, thank you very much. If you think back over the messages from all of our panelists, and let's remember that, as several people have said, in creating value, we're not trying to go back to the old normal. What we're really trying to create is a new world of business and of life, really, leapfrogging over old barriers to a new way of being that doesn't, again, doesn't go back to the old way, but does lead us over to our shared SDG goals. Or as my colleague Amanda Ellis said, women as architects of a new world. So I'd like to congratulate all the women entrepreneurs who are being recognized here. Congratulations on what you've built and the change in the value in the world that you're really creating. And turn this back to, I believe, Amanda.
Aloha. Thank you so much, Patty, and our wonderful awardee and finalists for the European and North American region. I still am failing at my tech issue here in figuring out how to get my video to show again. But I think we were going to open now to a more general Q&A. I know we still have Yoram and Amy and Anna with us. So it would be wonderful if we have any questions from the audience. I know we have a couple of budding entrepreneurs who have been very inspired to hear the stories of women here. So it would be great if any of you have advice for women who are thinking about setting up a business at this very challenging time of COVID. As entrepreneurs, I know you're risk takers and innovators. Do any of you have advice on women thinking about going into business at this challenging time?
This is Stephanie. So I think that's a perfect question. And maybe can I just run through everybody so that if people have one piece of concrete advice, they can weigh in with that. Does that work? I was thinking maybe Amy, start with you. What's your one piece of concrete advice? And then we can move to Yoram, and if Julia's still on, and then move to the three awardees.
Well, I should start by saying I haven't started my own business, so I'm dying to hear what our entrepreneurs have to say in response to this question. But in my experience of working with entrepreneurs, my one piece of advice would be network. Network is everything.
Julia, are you still on by chance? I don't see her. Yoram, how about you? What's your piece of advice?
Right. So my advice would be, if you want to get finance, which I think is crucial to scaling up, get your information right. Have a very solid administration, and for many entrepreneurs, that means outsourcing early, because you're probably very good at networking and selling and making a good product. So find someone else to help you with getting the administration and your information right, and I think the banks will be very happy to finance you.
And I would say, Bessie and Katerina and Iona, your advice, but also maybe what you can also talk, each of you, about is what do you need from others? I mean, obviously you're very entrepreneurial on your own, but besides a piece of advice, like what would you expect that would be helpful to you? Bessie?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first in the order. I mean, it's interesting to hear the advice from the others here, because I think that advice is still true today for us as a growing startup. And to start with that and what we need, I completely agree that networking and having a support network and an advice and a connection network is just essential, no matter where you are. And that's a major thing that we're always looking to grow at Cloud to Street. And then to pivot off of that to my advice to future or other entrepreneurs is specifically, and I think especially for women, is looking for mentors and people who have gone through this before. Whether you've done a business before or it's your first one, like this is for me, there's so much that you don't know. And there's many who are very excited to help you learn the lessons that they had to learn as you go along. So really being eager to learn as you go along, really at every step, including how to do really good administration and good financial management if you don't know how to do that.
Okay, so I'll go next. So my advice would definitely be to point to SDG number 17, partnerships. And partnerships in terms of also validate what your business idea before you go on the market. We're taking this time when it might not be as many clients as before to make our products better, make our offer better, make it more valuable, and also listen to our clients to see what has changed during COVID-19 and what are the needs right now. So what I would say as an advice is actually also what I'm looking for, partnerships. So validate your products and your services with the client. And at the same time, I'm looking for partnerships with international corporations that wants to test nudging and behavioral design as a method within their sustainability initiatives. And maybe we have some products that we can validate with your help. So there we can build strong partnerships. And I think that's what we need in times of this.
I guess I'm just going to echo everything that has been said thus far. But what I would add to that, because, being a social entrepreneur and a lot of times having to focus a lot on a mission that's quite challenging when it comes to, preventing and combating human trafficking. One thing that I would advise you to do is not quit when you feel like you're not equipped or when you're reluctant to taking on this challenge. A lot of times, especially as women, we tend to get discouraged and we tend to see everything that will probably be hard or could go wrong, but don't quit it. And if you quit before you go to bed and then pick it back up as you wake up in the morning. Allow yourself to do that, but that would be it. And as far as who do you work with, our experience has shown us that non-traditional partners, people that you would normally look over in the beginning, they end up giving us some of the biggest impact. So don't just overlook folks because they don't look as your first target. Keep a very open mind and allow yourself to look at what the non-traditional actors who can come on board and add value to your business could be.
Well, and I think maybe I want to ask Patty and Amanda to actually answer the same question. And Anna, maybe I'll give Patty, Amanda, and Anna the three last comments here, because you've all worked with lots of entrepreneurs. And so I'd love to hear your perspectives on this. And we have about 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to, Patty, go to you first, then Amanda, and then Anna.
Okay. And I'll be quite brief. You're right. I've worked with entrepreneurs for a very long time now. And my advice would be, remember to work on yourselves as much as your business. In the programs we build, for instance, working with Joram, we say we develop people, they grow businesses. So the leadership needs of your companies are going to change over time. You need to make sure that you're ready to meet those leadership needs. So focus on leadership skills.
And I'm going to give a policy response. Having previously been lead specialist for gender at the World Bank and then run the New Zealand Development Agency, I want to give a real shout out to UN Women as supporters of women entrepreneurs, not only through their specific programs, but also through the We Empower G7 advisory. When we think that here we are in 2020, it's the 10th anniversary of UN Women, but it's the 25th anniversary of the Beijing platform. And in no country in the world has full gender equality yet been achieved. But even worse, in my view, is that in only 8 countries in the world is there gender equitable legislation. And I'm looking in the chat at Azu Sharma and her question about the gaps, the pay gap resources, opportunities. It is true there is not a level playing field. And so my answer is not one from an entrepreneur's standpoint, but one from those of us who want to support you to be able to be the architects of a better world. And that's why the role that UN Women plays in ensuring a gender responsive policy environment for COVID, but also on the broader picture, the wonderful campaign that we're involved in together with the World Bank and the Women Business and the Law program to make sure that we can bring our important voices to policymakers and help you level that playing field. So thank you. This is a wonderful segue, Anna, to you, and to say thank you for the incredible leadership that you bring to this whole G7 advisory program. And thank you to all the partners who support it so that we can help.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and for your generous support to our program. And as the advisory group member, we really appreciate your support and to the UN Women agenda. I had actually picked two things from my side in terms of what I would recommend. One is, I think it's very important, and I did mention it earlier, with both MasterCard and Mary Kay being wet signatories, that I think it's very important at these times, particularly, that we show solidarity through leading with gender equality, and that we are looking to, if it's workplace issues, marketplace issues, or community-based issues, that we focus on gender equality at the forefront. And the Women's Empowerment Principles framework really allows everyone to do so. The other one is around, I haven't heard enough, I think. I really appreciate anyone that has tried to survive this pandemic by being digitally connected. And I've seen both here in my local community that those that had me on their mailing list, they already had a digital mailing list somehow. I've been able to connect with them during the pandemic. I can also see that they've been trying to innovate and trying to find ways to continue their business remotely, even though they're retail and local, they have found ways. And I really encourage everyone, both from a policy perspective, from a supporting perspective from our side, but also women entrepreneurs themselves, that digital is a way to kind of overcome also this really hardship times of being potentially dislocated from the consumers and the partners, and that this has, as I've seen, really played a big difference. But I'm very excited to hand it over for Stephanie to also talk about a little bit on the next steps and where we're heading with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and everyone, all the panelists. Of course, amazing stories and very inspirational. And I know we've had a lot of questions in the chat box and inspiration about wanting to get more information. So just a couple things. You can always send us an email. We've left the email in the chat box, and we will direct your question to the right person. It's empowered.women@un.org. And also check out the weempower.org website. We are sponsoring tomorrow a financial fundamentals 1 hour We Learn class. So think about signing up for that with the Business Development Bank of Canada. Anyway, in moving forward, I want to really thank the collaboration we've had here. I want to particularly thank the European Union for its support of the We Empower program and for its support of this event and for having Hilda Hardeman be part of it. I want to thank the ILO, UN Global Compact, of course, the ASU Global Wrigley Global Futures Lab, and Amanda for being amazing partners. Patty and Amanda for both being on the U.S. Advisory Board for our program, and also Amy, I'll thank MasterCard because Kyle is on as well. So thank you all so much for being part of this. Please be in touch with us via the website and the email, and we will get information to you and continue this conversation as we seek to ensure that we get back our years of progress that we've apparently lost in the last 25 weeks. We need to move forward together and build back better. So thank you all very much.